Don't count them out quite yet. The Cardinals just finished off a very tough stretch of their schedule, and they did it with their head above water. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you here, September 5th, 2024. It's a Thursday afternoon. The Cardinals last night capped off their series against the Brewers, which also capped off their stretch of 19 games in a row against playoff contenders, teams that are basically in the playoffs, not even just vying for it, but they are soundly, handily in. And the Cardinals wrapped it up with another win, 3-2 in 10 innings over the Brewers. How about Luken Baker with a game-winning hit? Last night was the hero of the game. Got to talk to Jim Hayes on the Bally Sports broadcast and everything. Very cool, very exciting to see for Luken Baker, who, yeah, I mean, we talked about it it felt like years. Like, let's see this guy in the big leagues. What could he bring to the table as someone who just raked when he was in the minors, hit a bunch of home runs, has a power bat from the right side off the bench. He doesn't have to be a starter to be a value to this Cardinals team. And I think Oli Marmol is going to be a much better manager down the stretch. And I would include next year if you have a Luken Baker at your disposal off the bench instead of Brandon Crawford and all the options that we know the bench was just not useful to Oli Marmol. And that's why I kept saying he's managing with a hand tied behind his back for most of the year. And certainly that felt like the case last year. But, man, I guess Bernie Miklasz is saying it now too, though. So y'all should go check it out on his channel. Maybe people will be more agreeable to the message when Bernie says, hey, maybe Oli is not so bad as compared to when I've said it and people have gotten really upset. But that's okay. Just like Bernie, I'm welcoming the comments, so you guys let me know what you think and what you thought about last night's win as well as where the Cardinals are now. Because when we looked at that 19-game stretch, it began with that Dodgers series about 2.5-3 weeks ago at Busch Stadium and concluded with what we saw yesterday against the Brewers. Cardinals went 11-8 over that stretch. The only series in that stretch that they lost was the first one against L.A. when I kept saying, hey, guys, Cardinals fans, they played pretty well. They just didn't hit enough, and they lost the series. Very easily could have won the series. There was a world in which maybe they could have swept the series, although they were not quite as close to doing that. But, yeah, it's very interesting to see the way that things have all played out for the Cardinals over this span, where I think 11-8 was about the worst they could have done, where I would still be talking about the playoffs on today's b-schaeff Daily. But that's kind of the mentality and the mode that I am in, and the question will be, now that the schedule begins to lighten up a little bit, as it's going to do on Friday with the Mariners coming to town back at Busch, and there are 500 clubs still trying to find their way into the playoffs as well, but a little lesser of an opposition than the teams the Cardinals had been playing. And then the schedule does. It gets easier throughout the month of September. You are going to have to play teams like the Reds that, even though in the standings they're a little bit below you, they have given you fits with the way that team and Ellie De La Cruz and company can run the bases and can steal on your catchers and your pitchers. So it's not that just because the schedule gets easier in terms of the records of the opponents that it means the Cardinals are a shoo-in to win those games. In fact, we've almost seen the Cardinals rise to the level of their competition when they're playing good teams, and they sort of play down to their competition when they're playing lesser teams. That's been a little bit of a story of the season for the Cardinals. I wonder if anecdotally, it feels that way, right? I wonder if it matches what we actually see in their records. Not quite. Maybe it is just a little bit more anecdotal, but they've played well against teams better than 500. A lot of teams, don't have winning records against teams above 500. The Cardinals 41-45. So I guess play well is maybe overselling it a bit. For instance, the Cubs are 39-42. The Cardinals are right in that same range, 41-45. They've held their own, and they certainly have done it recently with the way that they played over the 19-game stretch. Teams like the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Padres, the Brewers twice. The Cardinals held their own in all of these games, or I should say all of these series. They dropped games within those series where you thought, oh boy, this is where they go back off the rails, and yet they kind of found their way and continued to plug along. And now I think last night's game is such a good example of where the Cardinals are at and in a different spot right now. I do think the bullpen, more so than it has been previously, is something you have to worry a little bit about, but it's not everybody in the bullpen. Romero is somebody who struggled last night, obviously gave up the home run after Sonny Gray had such a strong start, 7 innings, 7 strikeouts, 1 run allowed. That's an ace-like performance from Sonny Gray, and the Cardinals needed it against the Milwaukee Brewers. But then JoJo comes in, he gives up the home run that ties the game, and you just realize, hey, 2 runs probably not going to hold up in this one. But how about this? When you have Ryan Helsley get you the save in Game 2, or really, did he get the save or the win? Because he had to go multiple innings, so I guess that would have just been the the win because he gave up the man-for-man but then came back out for the next inning. 2 innings from Helsley on Tuesday meant that Wednesday they weren't going to have him. So what would the answer be for the Cardinals bullpen? Well, it was a lights-out version of Andrew Kittredge and a lights-out version of Ryan Fernandez. Strikes out the side, gives up 1 walk, which you're going to do strategically in a 10th inning anyway. Just make sure you're getting the matchups that you want. And that was actually an intentional decision by Oli Marmol, who, once again, I think is now managing this Cardinals team with a little pep in his step because he's got a roster where it emboldens you. And it's not like it's been night and day differential, but this is a roster that I think emboldens Oli Marmol a little bit more than previously to make those types of aggressive decisions that can work out late in a game. And that's exactly what happened last night when it comes to the moment where they were playing the matchups. They were going to decide, hey, we can put a guy on base here. Yes, technically it is the winning run, but when you're down your closer, when you've already used Kittredge and JoJo, and you're using Ryan Fernandez, now is the moment to win this game. You aggressively pinch hit Luken Baker because of the matchup. You pinch hit for Brendan Donovan, but because of the matchup, you felt like that was your best chance to win in that moment. And so that's the way that Oli Marmol goes. It works, and then that leads you to then say, hey, because I had the bat off the bench, they could come up with a clutch hit to go ahead in the top of the 10th inning. Now I can be aggressive again and say, we'll put the winning run on base because we just need Ryan Fernandez to get this strikeout against a player that has a higher K percentage than you might see otherwise with the guy that would have been at the plate. These are the types of things that, if they don't work out, Cardinals fans go, what are you doing? Why did you do this, Oli Marmol? You can't possibly be serious. But then you think about the logic behind a lot of these decisions, and that's, I think the logic has always been there when it comes to all these decisions. The problem oftentimes, and look, he's been wrong before. He was wrong to pinch hit Brandon Crawford for Siani, right? He was wrong. There have been things he's done that have been mistakes, in my opinion. But when you can put yourself in a position of strength and you're managing from strength rather than managing from basically chasing your tail all season long, it can look a lot differently. Last night, they say, look, Jackson Chourio is going to be more likely to put the ball in play. He's not as good of a matchup for Fernandez. We think Fernandez can strike out Rhys Hoskins. And look, if he happens to hit one in the gap, we lose the game instead of being tied. You know what? We might lose that game at that point anyway because we have no idea if we expand it to the 11th inning after playing 12 the night before, who in the hell is going to pitch the 11th? Probably Fernandez for a second inning, kind of like Helsley did on Tuesday, but that's not conducive to winning. Right? It takes a really special group to be able to come around and win a game like that. So they said, look, the best chance is going to be to go ahead right here and now and make it happen. We're going to walk a guy that would be the winning run, not just the tying run, putting that on base, but we're okay with it. And I don't think Bally Sports posted to Twitter their Oli Marmol post-game last night, but I saw Van Hickelstein put out this 18-second clip of the answer that I'm referencing. So we'll play that for you. This is still courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest. But listen to the question and the answer as Oli Marmol, who a lot of folks think he doesn't really know what he's doing when it comes to in-game decisions. Here's how he thinks through an in-game decision, and I'll explain how this isn't the only time in this game that he outmaneuvered Pat Murphy.
Yeah. Moving the 10th, putting the potential winning run on base, obviously it worked. You just wanted to take the bat out of Chourio's hands.
Yeah, he's a high-contact guy, man. He's having a good season. You look at his last 60 days, he's thumping. Hoskins has more strikeout in him. Fernandez has more K in him. I'll take my shot. Game ends there. Great. If not, we gamble.
That was the answer from Oli Marmol about putting the winning run on base, which, again, if it's a double into the gap that the Brewers win the game on instead of a strikeout by Rhys Hoskins because the runner scores from second and the other one scores from first, I think Cardinals fans would have ripped Oli Marmol saying, why would you, if Chourio beats you, it's still tied, you still have a chance. But look, he thought through it. This was the thought process behind it. I think a lot of times we have a hard time separating process from results, and it's just hard to argue against Oli Marmol having a thought process for the moves that he makes. I mean, in this instance, it was flawless, and I think a lot of the times it is pretty strong. It's not going to be perfect every time because he's a human being, but I think he thinks through a lot of these things in a way that Cardinals fans maybe don't give him credit for. So, look, I'll criticize when I think a move is wrong, but you're seeing an example last night of Oli Marmol putting the team on his back in a lot of ways because he positioned them to win the game. There are going to be comments here that say, oh, I'm full of it. How could I possibly dare say that? But let me know. I think if you really are honest with yourselves and you look at the two scenarios that we're talking about from late in last night's game, Oli Marmol came up aces in both scenarios. The other one I'm talking about, as I've already mentioned, It's the moment where you have Luken Baker pinch hit for Brendan Donovan in the top of the 10th. And this is a great tweet. This comes from Kurt Hogg, who is a Brewers beat reporter, for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. And he credited the question Adam McCulvey asked to the manager of the Brewers, Pat Murphy, in the 10th inning. He's asking about that decision to lift Joel Payamps after 4 pitches, bringing in Hobie Milner. And the response from Pat Murphy indicates that he figured they were going to get to face Brendan Donovan for that key at bat, and that's not the way that it played out. He said, Arenado's swinging the bat great. Payamps has pitched a lot. He's warmed up a lot. He doesn't have much fuel. And then he says, they don't always hit for Donovan in that situation. I chose Donovan. Basically, I chose to face Donovan, not Arenado. They intentionally passed Arenado, and that allowed them to bring in Hobie Milner, who is a left-handed pitcher. The idea being, okay, he's going to face Donovan. But when Pat Murphy says they don't usually hit for Donovan, there might be the lacking realization of who they've had at their disposal to hit for lefties throughout the season. They haven't had those options. They didn't have a Luken Baker off their bench. And I had heard that there was maybe some in the Brewers bullpen that didn't fully respect or understand what Luken Baker would be capable of at the big league level when the Cardinals called him up a couple of weeks ago. And now Luken Baker has burned the Brewers twice. So that's kind of fun. Look, I just think that Pat Murphy, I'll continue the quote. He said they don't always hit for him. He's been a great hitter, viable hitter. They don't always hit for him. I looked at the other 2 guys they could hit there, Walker or Baker. I liked Hobie's changeup, and that's one that certainly would have gotten to Walker. I think you could have made the case that the changeup could have been an issue for Jordan Walker, but he's got the job done. I mean, he got the ground ball. You want to criticize that move, you can, but I trust in Hobie to throw strikes, and I trust that the off-speed would get Baker on the ground. And so sometimes your process is, okay, throw that changeup, get the guy on the ground. That's kind of what the Cardinals have done with guys like Andre Palante when he was a reliever, but we saw that doesn't always work out. You can get the ball on the ground, but is it going to be where somebody is standing, right? So those are the little minuscule details that go into these moments in these processes turning good or bad for a manager and for a team. But I just thought this was so interesting. I give my credit to VHS on Twitter, who retweeted that into my timeline and also posted the Bally video where we played a little audio for you. Like, I think those are 2 moves where Oli Marmol says, look, man, I haven't pinch hit a lot for Donovan, but when it's Matt Carpenter and Brandon Crawford and a backup catcher as my options, it's understandable maybe that you would not be as confident in those guys compared to having Walker or especially Luken Baker. Like, I think Luken Baker kind of takes the better at-bat off the bench than Walker. I think Walker is the guy that you're going to hope turns into a star as an everyday player. But Baker might have that mentality where he can come off the bench. He's not going to be a little too swing happy because he takes his walks. He could very well fit into the bench spot. Like I said yesterday, maybe he occupies Matt Carpenter's role next year, and you flip that from a lefty to a righty, and you still have room to bring Goldschmidt back if you want to do that. And maybe they don't want to do that, and that's fine. I kind of like I was with Adam Wainwright. You see the vision and somebody that's so important to the organization, and you just want it to work out. But I could also understand if you say, look, we just don't project that Goldie is going to be the same player next year, so it's okay, you can let him go. Well, then maybe Luken Baker plays even a little bit more often. Maybe he is that platoon bat that starts against lefties, and Burleson, if he can handle it defensively at first, starts against righties. But I could certainly look into the notion of Baker just being in the Matt Carpenter role next year with flipped-handedness and having that be fine. And I think Luken Baker would be fine with it too, because he would say, yeah, I shouldn't be in AAA. Give me a shot. Even if I'm not a big league starter, I want to show what I can do, and that's going to be true whatever role you put me in. So I think that was a very interesting moment from last night. Can't say enough about the way that Sonny Gray pitched, and the Cardinals just need that from him going forward if they're going to make any sort of run toward the playoffs. That's just got to be part of it. Every 5th day, they've got to know that Sonny Gray is going to go out there and shove. And look, I'm not counting the Cardinals out yet. People are mad when I tweeted that on Twitter. People are saying, oh my gosh, there's no way. Look, I mean, they're not gaining on the Braves. That's absolutely true. If the Braves win every game, there's nothing the Cardinals can do about it anymore. But they're still 5.5 out. They're still playing some pretty quality baseball right now, and it just takes one little slide from a team like Atlanta, and suddenly you could be right back into the mix of things. I will agree that the division is out of reach for the Cardinals. They're 10 games back of Milwaukee. But all the Cardinals can do is play their best baseball. And if they come up short at the end and they win 83 and it takes 85 to get in, then we'll be able to look at it and say, yep, the Cardinals should have done it a little bit sooner. They should have done the moves. They should have DFA'd Crawford. They should have made the roster better a lot earlier than they did, and that goes on John Mozeliak. We know that John Mozeliak does not have anybody looking over his shoulder in terms of how he runs the organization. We know that he's not going to be fired. Bill DeWitt is going to allow Mozeliak to finish on his terms. Do his terms include a revamp to the front office that could elevate Chaim Bloom around him and could allow for other voices to be integrated in a more meaningful way? We'll see. But, we just know what it's going to be with John Mozeliak. That doesn't mean we can't still evaluate his moves, and I think they did. I think if you're Oli Marmol, you probably would have been appreciative of a better bench happening a lot earlier in your season that it was given. And if they win 82, 83 games and they come up a little bit short, I'm not going to look at it as, oh, yep, this manager, he just can't be salvaged. I'm going to look at it and say, now, why was there such complacency from John Mozeliak to allow for that roster to look the way that it looked until mid-August? And then the Cardinals go on a 11-8 stretch against their toughest part of the schedule. We'll see, man. They're more likely to miss the playoffs than they are to make it, but I think you just got to take it day by day and series by series right now. Cardinals will have the off day on Thursday, and then they will welcome the Mariners to town on Friday, and we'll just have to wait and see whether there's an opening that may develop. You're going to be watching the Braves closely, and if you're a Cardinals fan that's still kind of interested in the notion of, hey, maybe this team could make the playoffs, then that's really your only avenue in, because the D-backs and the Padres are so far ahead. They're kind of right there with the Brewers. It's just going to be very difficult at this point. And maybe there are Cardinals fans out there. Let me know in the comments if this applies to you, where you would say, I don't even really want the Cardinals to make the run and make it, because then that will tell the front office, well, all's well here. There's nothing that needs to be changed. There's no adjustments that need to be made, when we can really typically tell that throughout the majority of the season, the Cardinals, weren't quite where they wanted to be. And so you can't necessarily look at that and say, yeah, everything's fine here. Maybe that's the way that some Cardinals fans feel, that they don't want the Cardinals to make the run because it will almost justify the means that got them here. Let me know if that's maybe your opinion on the matter. But before we get out of here, I would like to make sure we go down on the farm to talk about one standout pitching performance from yesterday in the minor league affiliates. It's time to go down on the farm. Brought to you by Hastings Layers Premium Eggs.
You'll be happier than a jackass eating thistle.
Huh? Thanks again to Hastings Layers Premium Eggs for sponsoring our Down on the Farm segment this season. By the way, if you guys would like to get involved and you have a business or an entity that would like to be a partner of B-Schaeff Daily, certainly send me a direct message at bschaefer12 on Twitter and let me know. I have struck up similar conversations within the last few weeks of segment ideas and things we could do for the show. If you want to support the show and have a business that may get some attention because of the show, well, that would be even cooler. So thank you guys for your kind support of the program and for your comments and everything on YouTube as well as Spotify. Okay, one guy that I want to talk about for Down on the Farm today, and it's a big name. It's a name that we've been trying to get going this season, but he's been through a little bit of health issues. It's Tink Hence. And look, I made the commentary that Quinn Matthews has surpassed Hence as the top pitching prospect in the organization. All the lists are going to reflect that this offseason. Just trust me. MLB top 100s, Quinn Matthews is going to be probably a top 30 prospect in all of baseball by the time it's all said and done before 2025 rolls around. So, Tink Hence, though, where does he stand? Because I think he was kind of like top 50 range coming into the season. Didn't quite get to the innings amount that we were hoping to see from him, or the Cardinals anyway were hoping to see from Tink Hence. But he's still only 22 years old, and on the innings front, I guess that minor league season goes a little bit deeper than I realized, and he could end up getting a start in AAA before it's all said and done as well, just to try to round things out for his year and get him to the innings mark that they wanted. But they're still being relatively careful with him. He's at 78 1/3 innings after the 4 innings he pitched last night for Springfield against Northwest Arkansas, but the line looked pretty good for Hence. Gave up only 3 hits in the 4 innings. Couple of runs did score, and he walked a guy. How about this, though? 8 strikeouts for Tink Hence, who has that 2.76 ERA this year for Springfield. He's been dynamic. He's been electric, and 8 strikeouts in 4 innings will tell you that. Just looking to see him be a little bit more durable and get the workload up, which is something that's not really his fault. The Cardinals have brought him along very slowly. He's a slimmer body type. He's continued to put on muscle as he's been a professional ever since the Cardinals drafted him out of high school in 2020, and that's something that he's continuing to grow with. But just to find that durability, where can he be a guy that can handle a 150, 170, 180 innings load in the big leagues someday? That's kind of still the question surrounding Tink Hence. But, man, if the answer ends up being yes, think about Matthews and Hence in the same rotation maybe by 2026. That would be a lot of fun for Cardinals fans. And it's just good to see Tink Hence back on the mound and dominating again like he did yesterday. Gave up a couple of runs in 4 innings. That's a 4.5 ERA, but we're more focused on the health and the dynamic stuff that he is continuing to show. I still believe in Tink Hence, man, and it's going to be exciting to see if he can wrap up this year in the way that he's looking recently and then have a foundation to go into 2025 with that potentially being a debut year. I mean, it's possible that we could still see that for Tink next year. Is his future in the rotation or the bullpen? Maybe 2025 will be a prescriptive year toward determining that. But Cardinals fans, let me know. Are you excited about Tink Hence? Certainly, I think people are excited about Quinn Matthews. Memphis, I believe, was rained out yesterday, so nothing to report from there. But that's what's going on down on the farm. Brought to you by Hastings Layers Premium Eggs. That'll do it for this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening to the show, for commenting, for sharing the podcast with your friends who are Cardinals fans in your group chats, your family. Let everybody know, hey, this guy does a daily Cardinals podcast, and it's a lot of fun. So let's spread the word. Appreciate you guys, as always, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.